Resident Evil Requiem may very well be one of the most lore-heavy entries of the entire franchise, with so many connections to different plot points scattered throughout the series, and a straight-up document that literally retcons multiple moments of the franchise. Yeah, Requiem definitely doesn't hold anything back with the amount of lore it throws at us in a single entry of Resident Evil. Despite the amount of questions that this game answers though, and how Grace's report quite honestly fixes a lot of the plot holes throughout the series, there's still a ton of new questions that Requiem opens the door to us that ultimately leaves us wondering what the hell is going on. So yeah, on this episode of Nerdspaced Games, we're taking a look at some of the biggest unsolved mysteries and unanswered questions that Requiem introduced us to that we can only hope will get resolved in DLC or future games of the series. Oh, and this should be pretty obvious considering the topic of today's video, but just in case, major spoiler warning for Resident Evil Requiem. Before that though, if you're looking to save money on upcoming horror games for PC, including Fate of Hunk 2 Remake, then you might want to hear about today's sponsor. Shout out to Fanatical for sponsoring this video. As a horror gaming fan, I'm always looking around the internet for the best deals on upcoming horror games. After all, I'm consistently buying them so that I can cover them on the channel. Thankfully, Fanatical has a ton of fantastic, pun intended, deals on some of the most anticipated horror games releasing this year. Games like Fate of Hunk 2 Remake and Toxic Commando, both of which you can get incredible deals on for Steam purchases. For example, Fate of Hunk 2 Remake, you can get 15% off versus buying it directly on Steam. Toxic Commando, 12% off. And there's so many other great deals on their platform, not just horror games. They even have a spring sale around the corner starting Monday, March 9th. But the best part about Fanatical is that they purchase their keys directly from the publishers, which means you'll still be supporting your favorite developers. So save big by using the links in the description for either Fate of Hunk 2 Remake or Toxic Commando. Support the channel, support the developers, and save yourself money. It's a win-win-win for everybody. Anyway, back to today's video. Number 1, what is the Fate of Hunk? One of the biggest surprises in Requiem was the return of a fan favorite character from the bonus game for Survivor in Resident Evil 2, the Grim Reaper himself, Hunk. Not only does he appear in Requiem, but we get to see him face off against Leon Kennedy in the Battle of the Raccoon City survivors. This encounter was definitely all about the fan service, but sadly it ends in Leon appearing to kill Hunk with a fatal blow to Hunk's neck. Or did it? On closer examination, there's a few takeaways after the battle that appears to hint that Hunk is still alive and well. The first are some of the marks that we can find on Hunk's hand. Looking closely at his body, we can see that Hunk appears to have Raccoon City syndrome, or even something similar to another character in the game, Zeno. If the symptoms are more similar to Zeno's, then this could hint towards Hunk having similar powers as Zeno, including the ability to heal himself. Regardless, there's an even bigger piece of evidence that hints towards Hunk surviving. If you leave the room and then come back moments later, you'll find that Hunk's body is missing. And yeah, this could totally be an example of Capcom removing the bodies of enemies you killed from the scene, but for one, this could have easily been resolved by locking us out of the area once we left the room where his body was at. And more importantly, you can still see Hunk's blood in the area where his body was at. Seems intentional to me that Capcom really wanted to tease his survival to us, you know? After all, Hunk stands for Human Unit Never Killed, right? Wouldn't be too surprising to find out that he survived somehow. Now the real question will be how? Is it because he's infected with something or a different reason altogether? Hopefully we'll find out more about his fate in future DLC content for Requiem. Number 2, who did they take? The ending Resident Evil Requiem left us with a few different cutscenes following the credits, one of which took us back to the ruins of Raccoon City, in which we saw some special ops, probably working for the Connections, arrive at the scene where the final boss fight took place. In this scene, we heard that they had neutralized all of the BSAA soldiers in the area and were there to distract someone before the Hound Wolves arrived to stop them and collect them for themselves. Now there's a lot of possibilities as to who this could be, although by a process of elimination, there's really only 2 options that I think make the most sense. One, it's what remains of Gideon after Leon killed him in his nemesis form. It would make sense that the Connections would want the nemesis parasite for themselves, and Gideon still had some value to them. However, the more likely scenario is that the Connections were there to retrieve the body, or actually the head, of Zeno. I'll go more into detail with Zeno in the next entry, as that's a whole other mystery that we need solved, but long story short, he was still an executive of the Connections, and if there is a way to revive him or recreate him, I'm sure they'll want to do that, hence why they are probably there to collect his body. I guess the biggest question though is not who they are collecting, but why do they want him? Maybe because his blood has Elpis in it, and since the wolves were able to get Elpis before the Connections arrived, Zeno's blood might be the only way that they can get a sample of Elpis and learn how to counter it with BOWs that are immune to it. Number 3, who is Zeno? As promised, another big question that we still have after beating Requiem is the identity of Zeno, the mysterious executive of the Connections. There's so much that we don't know about him, but there's also a lot of assumptions we can make in regards to his character based on the things that went down throughout the game. The most obvious conclusion that we can come to is that Zeno is probably a clone of Albert Wesker. Let's not forget that Zeno not only has the same abilities as Wesker and has similar facial features as him, but he also has the same mannerisms and even the same voice actor of Albert Wesker from RE4 Remake. I mean, Capcom couldn't be more on the nose about the similarities between Zeno and Wesker. On top of that, Gideon insults Zeno at the end of the game, in which he calls him, and I quote, "nothing but an imitation." Interesting choice of words, don't you think? Clearly, Gideon is aware that Zeno is a clone of Wesker, hence why he said what he said. Something else that implies that Zeno might be a clone of Wesker is actually something from the spin-off game that we learned, the Umbrella Corps. In that game, we learned that the leader of the Umbrella Corps is heavily implied to be a clone of Wesker, although it's never officially confirmed. Considering this game features Hunk, who works for Zeno, perhaps those theories were true and Zeno was the person that was implied to be the leader of Umbrella Corps. Regardless, there's other possibilities out there as well. For example, let's not forget about Project W, you know, the same project that led to the creation of Albert Wesker and Alex Wesker. I mean, Spencer lied to Wesker about one survivor of that experiment in the form of Alex Wesker, so would it be too shocking if he lied about others and maybe Zeno is another Wesker child? Regardless of who he is and his relation to Albert Wesker, there's a lot we can still learn about him, and I highly doubt he's completely dead. Perhaps he is a clone and the Connections can keep recreating him every single time he dies, hence why they went back for his body at the end of the game. Who knows, but I'll bet on the fact that we'll see him return in the DLC for Requiem. That's for sure, honestly, guys. I really believe that. Number 4, who is the leader of the Connections? Speaking of the Connections, there's now more mysteries about this secret organization than ever before, thanks to some new information revealed to us in Requiem. Specifically, we can thank Grace's report, as that file revealed the truth about the Connections and their influence throughout the series so far. First off, we learned that the Connections was around before the destruction of Raccoon City. In fact, they were the ones that influenced the fall of Umbrella and pinned it all on Spencer so that their biggest rivals were eliminated. Then we learned that they had influence over all the big bads of the series, including Tricell and the family. Finally, and probably the biggest reveal in this report, is that Brendan Bailey didn't create the Connections like we all thought he did. In fact, Bailey wasn't the only researcher working with the Connections, but so was James Marcus, one of the founders of Umbrella. Obviously, the Connections already had deep connections, pun intended, within Umbrella before the Raccoon City outbreak. However, this ultimately creates a really interesting question that we are now farther away from answering than we've ever been. Who created the Connections? And not only that, but who is the current leader of this secret organization? This is actually a question that I do think we'll explore more throughout the series, but we can't ignore the fact that Capcom has been extremely secretive about this organization, and there's something big waiting for us down the road. My thought process is that maybe somehow the secret leader of the Connections is someone that we thought was dead, and I'm of course leaning towards Albert Wesker. I know this doesn't completely line up considering that the organization was founded long before the fall of Umbrella, but there's just a few things that point towards it being him. One, the reveal that Zeno is an executive of this organization hints towards the fact that clones of Wesker exist. If that's true, then what's to say that the version of Wesker they killed in Resident Evil 5 was actually the Wesker, you know? Another issue is that the Connections had someone on the inside manipulating everything in every big bad organization in the series. Well, we know that Wesker was connected to at least 3 of those organizations: Umbrella, Tricell, and the HCF. Hell, he was even part of the other secret organization only known as the Rival Company that just completely disappeared from the series. Yeah, there's so many things that points towards Wesker being this secret leader, but for now, I'll just say that whoever this leader is, it's going to have a big impact on the series, probably in Resident Evil 10 whenever that happens, honestly. Something I don't really see anybody talking about much is the effect that Elpis has on the survivors of Raccoon City. Thanks to the reveal at the end of the game, we know that Elpis has the capabilities of removing all infections and abilities from someone's blood caused by viruses and parasites, right? That's why Zeno lost all of his abilities and powers after he took Elpis. However, it also cures the victims as well, hence why Leon recovered from Raccoon City Syndrome. However, what other effects will this new antivirus have on the protagonists of the series? For example, let's take a look at 2 characters specifically, Jill Valentine and Sherry Birkin. Before the events of Requiem, both of them had unique abilities caused from their exposure to the T and G viruses, right? Jill Valentine ages slower and Sherry Birkin has healing abilities. However, as seen with Zeno, Elpis appears to remove all powers and abilities caused by these viruses. Does this mean that Sherry and Jill will lose both of their abilities once they take Elpis? On the other side of things, we don't necessarily know the side effects caused by Elpis. After Leon took Elpis and removed Raccoon City Syndrome and the remaining traces of the T-virus inside of him, he said something pretty interesting.
Can't believe that antiviral actually worked. Feel better than I have in ages.
Yeah, interesting choice of words here, right? The reason I say this is what if, and maybe I'm off base here, but what if a side effect of Elpis is that it causes whoever takes it to age slower or even increases their lifespan to some extent? You know, like the side effects of Jill's exposure to the T-virus. This is actually something that I talked to Contraline about, another Resident Evil content creator. Go subscribe to the channel, by the way, and it does kind of make sense. What if this is how Capcom locks in their franchise protagonists and allows them to keep returning to the series going forward? After all, they've all been exposed to the T-virus at some point, so they'll all need Elpis, right? Characters like Claire, Jill, Rebecca, and many more will all need Elpis to survive, and if the side effect is that it increases their lifespan and makes them feel younger, then there's your key way to creating a way to use them for God knows how long in the series, you know? On that same note, this would explain how Chris Redfield, who also will need Elpis, is still active with Hound Wolf Squad as a 60-something-year-old man in Shadows of Rose. Number 6, where is Chris Redfield? Speaking of Chris Redfield, where the hell is he? Moments after Leon defeats Gideon and sits with Grace, both of which embrace their fate, Chris's Hound Wolf Squad, led by Umber Eyes, arrives to save the day. After which, Umber Eyes informs Leon that he has a secret message from Captain Redfield, and just like that, the screen fades to black and transitions to Leon and Grace outside of Ark. There's a lot to break down here, but the biggest thing deals with Chris Redfield himself. Why is his Hound Wolf Squad here but not him? Hell, even Sherry asked the same question to Leon. Well, I do have a few theories about that. The first deals with his role as guardian over Rosemary Winters, Ethan's daughter. At this point in time, Rose is about 5 years old, and if Chris is indeed playing an active role in her life at this point, he'll probably have his hands full right about now protecting her and keeping her safe. However, I actually think there's more to Chris's role in Requiem than this. Here's what I'm thinking. Chris isn't there to save Leon and Grace because he's actually investigating a different part of the city. He's doing this because he found out something important in his investigation. My guess, he's exploring the ruins of the Spencer Mansion. Just like how Ark was a secret base that nobody knew about in Raccoon City, I think Spencer could have made a second lab hidden in or around the Spencer Mansion. For the reason, I think we might get some DLC content of Chris investigating the ruins of the Spencer Mansion, which would make a lot more sense for him to do than Leon due to his deep connection to this mansion. To add to this theory, there's the whole Zeno plot too. With Zeno potentially being a clone of Wesker, obviously it makes a lot more sense for Chris and potentially even Jill to fight Zeno at some point while exploring the mansion. Maybe before Zeno comes to get Grace and Gideon at Rhodes Hill, Chris and Jill run into him in the Spencer Mansion. Whatever the case is, I do think Zeno will get a boss fight in the DLC, which is why we didn't get one with Leon in the main story Requiem, and I can't think of a better person to fight Zeno than the boulder punching asshole himself, Chris Redfield. Number 7, who is Leon married to? Finally, let's talk about the fact that everyone's favorite rookie cop is now officially married to someone. Straight up, this broke my wife's heart, but hey, we knew he had to tie the knot eventually, am I right? Anyway, if you're wondering about how I know Leon is married, it's because of a couple pieces of evidence that points to it. Firstly, in the scene of Leon walking away from Grace, Leon removes his glove and appears to put something on his hand. We don't really get to see a good look at what he did here, but there's something else that pretty much answers this question for us. Looking at the concept art for Leon, we can see that in the hand without the Raccoon City syndrome on it, he has a wedding ring on his wedding finger. Yeah, that's right, Leon fans, he's officially married to someone, but the real question now is, who is he married to? Well, this is where the internet has been fighting each other like crazy about the identity of Leon's secret lover. The most obvious culprit is, of course, Ada Wong. We all know that they've had a deep connection to each other ever since Resident Evil 2, and even though they may have had their differences throughout the series, Ada Wong is still the person that always seems to carry a part of Leon with him throughout his life. Another possibility is Claire Redfield. Outside of the small tease by Sherry in Resident Evil 2 Remake, Leon and Claire have not shown any sort of romantic interest in each other one bit throughout the series. They've always appeared to be close friends and nothing more. With that being said, there are some hints in Requiem that could point towards Claire being his wife. For example, on Leon's gun, the Requiem, and his watch, there's an angel wing motif. Considering that Claire is known to be associated with this same motif as she wears her Made in Heaven jacket in RE2 and even has a necklace which is an angel wing, it's possible that Claire could be the person that Leon married. Leon even has a charm that only he can use on his guns, which is of Claire. Still, while these two are the front runners, there's other wild possibilities out there, including the fact that it could be Sherry Birkin. I see a lot of people actually going with this theory for whatever reason. I've always viewed Sherry as like Leon's daughter, like they have that kind of relationship, but again, a lot of fans think otherwise. Still, considering the secrecy behind Capcom to hide his significant other from us, I definitely think it's someone we know and they are just waiting for the right time to reveal who it is. Well, that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Which question are you most curious about and which ones do you think you'll get answers to in the upcoming DLC for Resident Evil Requiem? Let me know all of your thoughts down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. Thanks again to Fanatical for sponsoring this video, and again, just want to remind you guys to pick up Fate of Hunk 2 Remake for 15% off using the link in the description down below. Well, thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.